What's going on, everybody? My name is James Jackson. If you're new here, I do tips, tricks, news, and reviews for the film and video making industry. So if this is content that you like, definitely make sure to hit that subscribe button and hit that bell so you can stay up to date on all the content going forth. Today, I'm finally excited to take a look at DaVinci Resolve 19. I know I'm late to the party, but this has to do with, work environment, given the fact that I had a major project that I had to oversee, and we just were not comfortable enough yet during the post-production phase to transition to a beta transfer. But now that we're now sort of in the waning stages where we're out of that stage, I finally was able to upgrade to DaVinci Resolve, and now I am ready to go ahead and get things started. One of the first things we're going to look at is the film look creator, and I know this one, especially if you guys have been following me, it's probably been getting a lot of buzz, especially given the fact that it does a lot of things that a lot of film emulation plugins do. Two specifically are, of course, Film Convert Nitrate and the brand that I have been sponsored previously by, which is Dehancer. I'm still technically sponsored by them. I do get commissions by Dehancer for people that do purchase their products. So this is all full disclosure, but none of that has changed my bias. I always look at things through facts and sort of what I believe is a true value asset. And that's what we're going to look at today is the fact, given the fact that you now have it, if you have the studio version, you get this essentially for free. You don't have to put any other plugins. Is this good enough to basically remove or throw away plugins like Dehancer and Film Convert Nitrate? And I will say it's a bit more complicated. And I think a lot of people, depending on what your needs is probably either going to be yes, and then it could also be no. And I'll get more into it. But let's not waste any more time. Let's go ahead and dive right into it. So right now I have, as you guys can see here, I have a couple things loaded up, just so also we see what type of color workflow that I have. I am working in the DaVinci YRGB Color Manage HDR DaVinci Resolve Gamut. And the reason why I'm using this one is I find it to be the most easiest system workflow when you're dealing with multiple cameras to put it into a more cohesive flow, especially when you're dealing with stuff like of a whole bunch of other stuff. Maybe you're working with like DJI, maybe you're working with GH6s and Aries and other cameras. This is the better workflow. So this is what we're going to be going through everything for. Now that we got that out of the way. So as you guys can see here, I have my buddy Juan Ortiz of Red Pin Media. He's also the guy behind the boom. If you haven't seen any of his content, check it out. I'm going to have a link to his channel, YouTube channel, in the description below. He's dropping gems all the time. This was from a shot that we did where he was reviewing a product. And this is basically on the Blackmagic Cinema Camera 6K. This is just straight out of the camera through the Resolve color management. A lot of the stuff is, it basically converted into a Rec 790 Gamma 2.4. This is the first thing I will say in terms of the film look creator, which you'll see here, that I have found, and I'm going to honestly just reset everything here. The first thing I found when I have dropped this is the fact that it does, let's say, some interesting thing, and you'll see how the waveform, if I turn this off, you notice that a lot of things are a lot more lifted, and then, however, what it does, it shows that on the extremes, it tends to crush both. It tends to crush the extremes of both the highlights and the shadows, the whites and the blacks, which means that the workflow is very, very, very different than what it would normally be. Because with something like Dehancer, I typically just get everything balanced out and then use Dehancer sort of to bring everything close to final delivery of the final look. This is different. This is where you kind of work with the film look creator in the beginning, after you balanced everything out, you put the film look creator at the beginning, and then you sort of use Resolve 19 with other nodes and other things to flesh out the final look. And what I mean by that is, I found that after you drop this on, I typically found that it's best to go to something like the curves, and I'll just turn on. Nope, I didn't want that. Let's reset this, and I want to turn on edible splines. And what I have noticed is that if I go in and say, okay, I'm going to lift these back up, and then pull, because it lifts the blacks, I want to pull the blacks back down. And then I'm going to look at the whites. I'm going to have it right about there. Now, you do have an exposure tool that you could do, but I found this is to be the better suit. And then, but you can, of course, still lift it up to where you'll get it a little bit better. Because if I turn this off, you'll see it doesn't, the blacks never hit the bottom. And you'll notice with the tools here in the custom, and I'm going to also turn turn off all the effects. You'll notice that none of the, you'll notice there with the fade, it doesn't crush the blacks as is if you went, whereas if you went with Dehancer, and I'll go pull that up so you can see the difference. If we were to put Dehancer here and turn this off, I'm going to go to the Dehancer, DaVinci Wide Gamma Intermediate, and I'm going to use Kodak Vision 350D, but I could also just turn this off. And I think by default grain is turned on, so I'm going to turn that off. It doesn't crush anything. In fact, one of the best things about Dehancer is that I have the different pairs where I can adjust, I could crush or lift the blacks if I wanted to. And it does it in a non-destructive manner. So like if I turn this on, you know, this lifts everything up, but then I could just pull the whites up, but then I can also then pull the blacks down. So this is one of the things that I personally feel that that's one of the missing things with the film look creator that I wish was in, that is at least the thing that's in Dehancer that I wish was in the film look creator. So you're going to go here and we're going to adjust it. We're going to try to adjust it just to sort of get it a little bit closer to where it was. I think that's a good starting point. And then you got the highlights, which is cool because it does reach the highlights, but it doesn't really do anything for the white points, which again, and then fade. So I know Blackmagic tends to watch some of my things. I will just say Blackmagic, if you are watching this, I would completely change the fade slider to a black and the highlight slider to a black point, white point adjustment, simply because it's much. I don't see the black point adjustment being that fade slider being very useful. I would never use it. I would never touch it. And to me, I get it. It has that more film-like look, but I would rather have more control over my blacks, Blackmagic, and my white points than having features that I don't think is going to be really useful. So just a side note with that. So let's get to the color portion of it. And quite honestly, this right here is, in my opinion, these last four are one of the best things, including another thing, which we'll get to later. But these four are one of the best things about the film look creator, particularly this one, which is the skin tone bias. And essentially what it does, it takes that line of that skin tone indicator, and then it lets you adjust particularly just that skin tone line on your scene, which is extremely useful if you have tools like, say, if you have tools like, say, this right here, if there's a DCCTL called from mononodes, which has balance, which gives you, sorry, gives you indications of how the skin is. In this case, we can see most of it is pretty on point. It's basically yellow. If you got yellow, your skin's is correct. If it's green, it's too green. If it's purple, that means it's too magenta. Simple enough, right? So with the skin bias, I can go ahead and make these adjustments, and now it's like, okay, too green, and then I move things over here to where it's more a line of having a more natural looking in terms of skin, where it's mainly yellow, and then I deactivate that, or let me go ahead and delete that node. And as you can see here, oh, sorry, turn that off. And as you can see here, it's perfect. It's great. And now, as we pull it up, the skin tones are looking nice. They're looking great. They're looking right on point. And then, of course, you got these last three, which is the saturation, richness, and bleach bypass. You know, with subtractive saturation, again, it's not pushing luminance. It's actually saturating the image without raising the luminance value, which is what we want. And then you can also dial in the richness with it, so you can really push out a lot of the depths of like various colors. In this case, the red. And then we got something like this, which is bleach bypass, which allows us to pull this stuff back, where you have all that richness, and then you add in something like a bleach bypass, and now you've got so much depth to the image. It does boost the contrast, which of course is some of the things of bleach bypass. It gives a very contrasty look. It gives maybe a crunchy look, but it also, with you combine all these things, it gives you a really punchy, really rich image. And again, you can play with it to your heart's desire. You don't have any of this in Dehancer or Film Convert Nitrate that push the colors, at least to the extent that this has. And that's really the big thing here. And the last major upgrade is the split tone. So what I found out is, what I've seen here is that I found that if you push it to various extremes, like you can see sort of what the effect is. So as you can see here, it's got that orange and teal. So I'm gonna just go ahead but I wanna give it a little bit more bias towards the teal. And then I'm just gonna pull it down. So you can see this is what it is off and then on. And then you got that, which is giving you that natural split tone, that orange and teal look if you want to use it. I'll turn it off here. So all of these things are, for me, are major wins with the Film Look Creator that you just can't do in Dehancer. Now Dehancer, I'll pull Dehancer up. So let me go ahead and disable these real quick. There we go. Now Dehancer does have something sort of a similarity. It has color density, which you can push this, and then of course this has that color contrast. But honestly, that's like, this is, and you got that color contrast, which does do subtractive saturation, but it's very, to me, it's a little bit more limited in the range you can go and how much you want to push it versus the Film Look Creator. And of course, as I've mentioned before, I'll turn this off. With the Film Look Creator, there isn't anything in here that you could do really for Bleach Bypass. With Bleach Bypass, you're going to have to build a whole other node and basically try to build your own personal Bleach Bypass in the afterwards. So all wins for the Film Look Creator. However, so let's go into the effects of the Film Look Creator. And here, I'll be honest, here is where I feel a lot of the things are going to wane, especially compared to Dehancer. So as you'll see here, we've got Vignette, and I'll just be honest, it's okay. It's okay for what it does, but nothing. I quite honestly, I feel that not Dehancer, Resolve has a better vignette just on as a standalone right here, which is a far better vignette that gives you way more control over everything. I would just personally just use the standalone vignette, and that's really with a lot of the effects. Like, and that's sort of what the feeling is that you're still going to use like the standalone, like you'll use the standalone halation because you can actually view the isolation areas if you want to, and then you could use the color. You could choose the color space type line. You can choose the strength. You could choose the strength if you want to. If you want, you could choose the gamma, the spread, and all that. So there's a lot more control. Not only that, you also have grain, which, you know, I think the grain here does a decent job here. So I feel like with the Film Creator, even though all these things here are here, I think the only one that is that you may have some presets that if you wanted to go with more presets like these film grain presets, you can do those. I think that's the only thing. But honestly, again, if we just turn on Dehancer, you'll see here, every single one of them, Dehancer has presets, and even their vignette. If you look at the vignette that you have, the size, you could choose the exposure, the size, the feathering, the aspect ratio. You have so much. You have so much that you have control over on the vignette in Dehancer that you do. And then of course you got the film grain, so you can choose the 35 and you can set it at different ISOs. So like you want to do 65 grade ISO, you can do that. And for me personally, the grain in Dehancer feels more natural. It feels like it's actually more part of the image of what it would look like versus the grain, even the standalone in Resolve. And the same thing with Halation. You can do that, and then you get a mask mode. You get a chance to have a mask mode, which if I turn this off and I go back to the Film Look Creator and go to Halation, there's no mask mode or way to target the specific area. So, even though with Bloom, again, there's no masking that targets specific areas. So you don't really have an idea of what areas you're affecting. You're kind of just playing a guess game, and the areas are kind of limited. Again, I don't know if it is, but for me, it just feels like the effects are really just sort of like quick throwaways in there, and it seems like Blackmagic kind of just wants you to use the standalone things like the standalone halation, the standalone vignettes in grain if you want to choose that. But even with those standalones outside of the vignette to me Resolve is the best at it. I think personally, Dehancer has the better effects where even if you don't use anything in Dehancer, you could just go through Dehancer, turn all the other effects off. I'll just show you right now. You can have it sort of set up where you're using the Film Look Creator to just build your base, and then you can just use Dehancer and just the effects in Dehancer, which I feel are just better, and sort of just use those for the more of the film effects like bloom, grain, halation, and things like that. And that's essentially it. A look at the Film Look Creator. Again, I think the best thing about it is those color parameters. The fact that you have a parameter that targets specifically the skin and lets you make the adjustments on the skin itself. I love that. The only thing I wish it didn't just put this huge like film look design already built in it. I wish there was a way to where I could just keep the 709 look and just sort of build it, but it sort of is the way it is. Again, you have that, you have the skin tone, you have the subtractive saturation, the richness, and then you combine that with the bleach bypass. And, you know, this is a this is I think it's a great starting tool to sort of build an idea of the look. But you're still going to need to make adjustments out of it. You're going to need to build nodes after to where you can control your white and black points. And I personally just believe that Film Convert Nitrate and Dehancer have better film effects like halation, film grain. The vignette, I'll give Resolve 19 the vignette. And also the point that I didn't even point out before, both Film Convert Nitrate and Dehancer have film stocks built in. Now, to be fair, they do have film look LUTs, but they don't have stocks built into the film look creator, which is one of the things that is like if you makes it harder if you're trying to get a very specific look. Whereas all the stuff that I talked about with Dehancer, you can do in a single node of Dehancer, and you pretty much usually get 95% there. And same thing with Film Convert Nitrate. Film Convert Nitrate is more limiting than Dehancer, but it's also not as process intensive as Dehancer, especially if you go up to higher resolution timelines. So ultimately, summarize, what do I think? I don't think it kills Dehancer or Film Convert Nitrate. What I will say is, if you're someone that just wants to build a film look, if you want to just build a film look of your own, this is a great tool to have. It's a great starting point. You'll still need the other tools in Resolve like Halation and Vignette and Film Grain to sort of take it more control that I personally feel. But all of that is still built into Resolve natively, that you could do it without ever touching Film Convert Nitrate or Dehancer. So you don't have to pay the extra fees for those plugins, which, like, I think Film Convert Nitrate's anywhere between $150 to $200, and then Dehancer's like $450 to $500. So a lot of money that you could be saving, no doubt. However, if you're someone that is trying to build a specific look, you want to replicate a very specific look of a film that you love, that had a very specific film stock, it's way, way, way easier and much more time saving with plugins like Film Convert Nitrate, but it's definitely better with Dehancer. Dehancer has the most film stocks out of all, both Film Convert Nitrate, Emulation. It has some of the widest range of film stocks that you can have. And you can still customize it. Even after choosing that film stock, you can customize it even more. And then you can still add a film print like a Kodak 2383 or the Fujifilm version. You can add all of those in right there into your film stock print and just go more crazy in terms of what you want in terms of a film look. So there's more options with the plugins in terms of a specific look that you're looking to try to replicate in terms of film stock. Does this mean that they're still worth anywhere between $200 and $500? To be quite honest, I don't know. I will say this: if I am building my own looks that I want to just really just go crazy and have fun with, without having to just look at film stocks, this is going to be one of my go-tos to go with. I really love, especially with that skin tone bias, where you really could take control and just go in and just choose how you want to look. So I think Dehancer still has its value. Is it worth $500, which is more than the entire plugin of Resolve? That, to be honest, and someone who, even though I am technically a sponsor of, I am sponsored by Dehancer, this is something that it may be harder to swallow with something like this having, and you could just sort of have your own unique creative look. But these are my thoughts. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I would love to know what you guys think. Let me know. Leave your comments down below. And as always, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And until next time, take care, everyone.